Welcome everybody. Today we have a very special pair of guests. Alessandro and I have invited Kiran and Jan-Pieter to talk about their game. Alessandro, can you perhaps briefly introduce or explain us a little bit about the background of this match?
Yes, the background of this match was that we from Eindhoven having made contact with Chess Club Dongen. We friendly exchanged invitation to our tournaments, and then we thought, let's do it in a more extensive way, that we have a match. And Dongen gladly accepted, and we had some very nice games. And the game that we're going to discuss this evening was really one of the most interesting games. And I thought that the spectators got value for their money, and we're very eager to hear the thoughts of the players themselves, Kiran and Jan-Pieter. So I'm looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, welcome Kiran and Jan-Pieter. And and the first move, d4, is of course not a surprise by Kiran, who has the white pieces, but we are immediately surprised, at least I was, by the second move, or the first move by the black player, a6. Perhaps Jan-Pieter, you can comment a little bit on your choice.
Yes, it's called the St. George defense, and the idea is basically that because you're advancing your queen side pawn so early, so a6 and b5 in the first two moves, you're taking control or putting pressure under the c4 square, which doesn't really prevent c4, but it doesn't allow you to exchange a b pawn for a c pawn, and a while later you can exchange the c for the d pawn, which contests the white center, and then in the long run black intends to take over the center and still have its pawns, because the d, e, and f pawn are still held back, and so they're kept intact. And that means that in the long run, black attempts to grab the center from around move 20-25. And secondly, because you're advancing your queenside pawns, white doesn't usually go queenside castle. So it's very natural for white to go kingside castle very early, because, well, black doesn't have anything on kingside early on. At the same time, the bishop on b7, so after a6, b5, the bishop is moved towards b7. That bishop is eyeing on g2. So in the long run, after white's center has been demolished, and that's quite a hard work to get done, and I didn't quite succeed in the game, but the intention is, once you can demolish white's center, that bishop is a killer bishop on white's kingside castle, and especially because white doesn't generally Venus shadow its bishop there, it's fairly easy to attack. And because black castles variate, you can always attempt moves like h5, h4, push the h pawn, push the g pawn, and then actually attack the king side. Sometimes black even queenside castles and then puts the other rook on g8, and then you basically focus all your pieces on that kingside castle, which you know is going to happen, because after a6, b5, it's very unnatural for white to go queenside castle, even though you could argue that it's safer on queenside compared to the kingside.
Impressive, Jan-Pieter. So you were well prepared. Kiran, did you know about this? Or was it the first time encounter for you?
Yes. Well, I was actually caught off guard with a6. And I was also a bit nervous, because they also play these b5, a6 structures with the Benoni and also the Benko gambit. I had a few painful losses against Bas van der Plasche, and after that I had looked at some videos on how to play against these kinds of setups. And I think, like Jan mentioned, it's important to have a quick center and develop your pieces quickly. But I was caught a bit off guard and just tried to play simple after this.
So let's move then, go a few moves further. So then b5 plan, and
yeah.
So yeah.
Here it's important to note, I would argue that white does appear to be able to take on b5. But I think that Kiran can perfectly explain why he didn't do that.
Yes, then you lose the pawn on e4, which is not ideal. So
yes,
it's important to guard e4.
Yes, and actually, black doesn't have to take on b5 right away. You can start by taking on e4, and once white takes on a6, you can take with knight. You open up the file for your rook.
Yeah.
The black bishop goes back to b7, and the knight will ultimately jump to b4, and it will be an active piece attacking a2, and you'll have a lot of offensive action, and black developed two pieces here, capture the center pawn, actually two center pawns, C and E pawn. So if I could get this on the board, I would be very happy with my opening, because I already achieved what I ultimately want to achieve, which is to demolish white's center, open up the bishop towards g-file. White's very uneasy, I would argue, here to castle either side, because the bishop is going to g2, and queenside castle also doesn't look very attractive. Because black's pieces are so active on the A and B file. So
not good indeed.
It looks like a Benko gambit without sacrificing a pawn.
Without the e4 pawn, indeed. Yeah.
So it's even worse than the encounter that Kiran already had. So
Yes.
I think queen c2 is a sensible choice, indeed. Then you took, so d5, Kiran, was an interesting move.
Yes, I was happy to find this over the board, actually, because I was not aware of this, but when I was first contemplating bishop into c4, but then I think black can play d5 immediately, and I think he's fine there. So I did not want to allow d5. So then when I was thinking this, I thought maybe, well, why cannot I play d5 myself? Because the pawn on c4 can still be taken, and I'm not in any hurry to capture that. And if black plays e6 or c6, then I can simply cement my structure with the pawn on d5, and I think I have a nice position, because black's d pawn is now permanently kind of backward.
So I'm interested to hear the opinion of Jan-Pieter about this.
Yes, so I'm still fine with this, because I can exchange my c pawn for the d pawn. I did make a mistake later on by playing d6, but I'll comment on that later once we're in that position, because I do agree that taking with the bishop on c4 is a proper move, because you're developing your bishop, you're putting some potential pressure on f7. So d5 is a proper move for white.
Okay, let me move on, indeed.
And actually here, instead of, I could have it's better, according to the engine, to play queen c7, and I think that's correct. But behind the board, I didn't dare to play it, because there appears to be some threat with d6 and a weak f7 pawn. So it's like, well, perhaps it could be because I could take on d6, but it didn't really feel right to allow for those kinds of potential threats, whereas once the queen is on c8, it's defended. But in terms of movability and activity, queen c7 is much better. And it also threatens e6 much better, because it defends d6, it prevents queen pawns pushes. So I think this is a first structural mistake for me to play queen c8 rather than queen c7.
Yeah, queen c7 feels better, though I can understand your hesitation, Jan-Pieter. Yeah, then you have to do something about the threat on d5, and I think queen d3 is, the best move.
Yes, I think this was probably the only move, I think, because any other move, taking the queen away, leaves the bishop on c1 undefended. So yeah, queen d3, but I'm moving my queen twice, but I think it's fine, because the black queen is now in an awkward position, and as I played later in the game, rook c1 and have many tempo moves against this queen.
Yes.
This knight is also very awkward, right? It takes some time. Also, well, it takes some time at least. It's not like black is also needs quite some moves to.
And it was partially my motivation to play d6, because I didn't want the knight to be trapped for the rest of the game. Also didn't want the rook to be trapped, and I thought with d6, I'll have a knight on c5, just like you're pointing out, and that's a strong knight, or knight on e5, which is also rather nice to have. And I thought my black squared bishop can develop through g6 and bishop g7, and that's a fine square as well, because it's eyeing on b2 and a1, which creates some potential long-term weaknesses for white, even though I think black is slightly not as optimal in this position. I mean, queen c7 would have made it better. But I think that playing d6 here was also not good, even though I had a plan for the knight. No, or I played. What is knight f6 first? Sorry.
First the knight is developed, knight f6.
Yes, and now I played d6, but it would have been better to play e6 because I was scared of pawn to d6 because then my bishop would become trapped on f8, but I can take right away. And g2 is also hanging, but I could also potentially just take bishop takes d6 and the bishop on c4 would be hanging. So I missed some threats here for black. Whereas even if you don't play d6, white is having some issues keeping its center together, and I'm already challenging the d5 pawn much harder and much better. I'm threatening bishop b4 to pin the knight and take the pawn on d5 later on. And I would wonder what Kiran would play here. I was wondering what Kiran would play here.
Yeah, maybe knight f3. Is it possible? Yeah, if you play bishop b4, perhaps takes on e6 and then.
Yeah, so if you could put that on the board, please. That would be something I would like to discuss a bit. So bishop b4, and you're saying I would take on e6, and I would take back with the f pawn. Mm-hmm. And I think here the value of the St. George defense, we're in move, 11 right now, is that black controls the center. I have two center pawns. I can push e5, I can push e5. My bishop on b7 is mightily powerful towards your kingside castle. And it took me 11 moves to get this position, but right now I would argue that in the long run, black would have the better chances because of its development, because of its potential in the center, which white took too quickly and lost and overplayed itself in that sense. And that's kind of the idea, which is what you set up in move 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I think maybe perhaps there is a better reply for e6, which I'm not able to see immediately, but maybe also, I don't know, giving up the pawn on g2. I don't know if there are some tactics with the d takes e6 and then takes on f7 and.
Yeah, but if necessary, you can maybe still just take, right? You don't have to.
I think I would just to prevent any tricks and say, well, I still have the center. I'm going to push d5. Perhaps I'm going to push d5, d4, e5, and I'm going to grab a center that's going to push back all your pieces that you developed with the tempo early on. And it's going to take you a lot of time to retreat.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe you can play your bishop move, maybe. Bishop
e5, yeah.
Yes. And it kind of reduces the pressure on d5, but I would still play bishop b4, allow for the double pawn on f6, because ultimately that's also an open file on the g file. And the king in the center is not as weak as you might imagine, because there are still the d7, e6, and f7 pawns. So I have so many pawns surrounding my king. It's not that easy for white to attack it.
Yeah, true. But for sure, this is less one-sided, I would say, than the other variation that we saw. At least.
Yes, true.
Yeah. But the setup that Jan-Pieter describes also appears in some Slav defenses. So indeed, it'll also be interesting. But indeed, it's interesting to see how the St. George strategy works out. And e6, indeed, that's the key move that should have been played.
Yes.
But in hindsight, everything is clear, usually.
Yeah, this looks much more challenging to play, e6.
Yes, this is a strong move. You're really pinning me down on the queen side.
Yeah, I thought that the knight now comes to d7, knight b d7, and c5 and e5 are the two squares for me to protect.
Well,
So-
there was another option here to play queen g4. Did you
Queen g4?
after? Yeah, on this moment, yeah.
No, I haven't really considered it. It's perhaps because I thought I'm behind in development, so moving my queen again feels really unnatural. Even though I understand that you're saying, well, you have to defend g2, either by playing g3, which is a really awkward move considering that my bishop is still on the long diagonal, or queen f1, which also probably isn't your favorite because you're denying yourself, or queen f1, which also isn't your favorite move as white. So yeah, perhaps this would have been interesting, but it felt so unnatural because I want to develop pieces, not move my queen again.
I'm
I
immediately inclined
fully-
to sacrifice it,
Yeah.
to sacrifice the pawn, and maybe go to d4 or so with my knight. Castle and then go d4.
Yeah, that sounds interesting because the queen side is completely dominated by white, so you don't really have to fear anything but from the open c file.
Not anytime soon.
Yeah, so it looks strange, but yeah, it makes white think. I'm not saying that it's better than what you played, Jan-Pieter, but
No, perhaps it is. Perhaps it is.
f3.
These types of situations with white, I get them relatively often. Yeah, I feel that you're a bit better, but it's maybe hard to make make a lot of progress. So in this case, I tend to just castle and look ahead, but you played knight a4 here.
Yes. Played this mainly because I wanted to take some more control of c5 and b6. Potentially, the b6 square. That was what I was eyeing for, and the queen is also in an awkward position. So yeah, I mean I can castle, but this just felt like a move that just keeps black on his toes a bit more. Also makes him a bit uncomfortable, I guess.
Yes.
yeah, you prevent knight c5 because then you take with the bishop and you have knight b6.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also this queen b3 idea, which I later played to put some more pressure on this b7 bishop.
Yes.
Yeah, I think knight a4 is an accurate move. There's nothing wrong with castling, but it shows that Kiran, you really want to get everything out of the position that you have, and that's a sign that you're an improving player. So it's nice to see that.
Yes.
Yeah, let me get castles. Yeah, it's interesting to see that there is indeed, it looks like there's a threat over the c file, but if you take on a6, then the bishop takes back, and then also the queen on d3 is attacked.
Yes, I did not. I missed this actually when I first played rook c1. I thought the queen has to move, but then when he castled, I realized, yeah, this is not possible. So I had to also castle myself.
And I think this also I think this also shows that the white squared bishop from white is rather misplaced in the sense that it looks very active and natural on c4, but with a pawn on d5 and a black pawn on a6, it doesn't really have any squares, and it's basically a 3-point pawn that's doing nothing more than defending d5, and you do have kind of a threat with perhaps bishop b3, but it's not an active threat. I can just move my queen and it's fine. So it's like white's position is better here, no doubt, because I'm struggling to develop. But I think that's despite the fact that white got a center early on, the pieces are not as actively placed as you would ideally have, because the rook on c1 is perfect, but all other pieces are also a bit awkward in the sense that the knight on a4 is not that optimal because it's a minor piece on the side of the board. The bishop on c4 is not that optimal. Bishop on e3, it does do something on the queen side, but there are no pawns to attack, so it can ultimately only defend the knight going to b6, and then I can exchange it, and that's it basically. So it feels to me that black is surviving, even though white is better. Black has no immediate weaknesses, so to speak.
Indeed, white is better, but not as much as one would superficially think.
Considering all the advantages in the center and all the...
Yeah. Yeah, probably you didn't consider queen to c7, Jan-Pieter, here.
No.
Although it is playable, but yeah, this is probably the kind of move you don't dare to make.
That looks very dangerous, right?
Yeah,
it feels so unnatural.
It feels, yeah. It takes a lot of courage to play it. And I'm not saying that I would have had the courage to do so. But yeah, that connects to rooks, etc.
That may be beneficial, yes.
Yeah. But especially in games with, say, somewhat tighter time limit, you don't want to spend a lot of time in calculating whether queen c7 is possible or not. So I fully understand your choice. Don't misunderstand me.
Yes, but it's like in positions like that, I feel like I'm never going to be able to calculate it for 100%. And then at some point, I'm like, it has to be somewhat intuitive as well. And keeping the queen on the C file, it feels so wrong to keep the white rook eyeing on it, that at some point the white bishop is going to have a trick. At some point, you're going to lose a piece or a pawn or something.
Yeah, so now queen b3.
Queen b3, and here it should be mentioned that black cannot defend with rook b8 because bishop.
Oh, that's
actually black should have defended with rook b8.
Yeah, it should have. Yeah.
And so white can obviously play bishop a7.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting part is that black now plays what
queen
was it you take? A queen a5. Yes, that was the brilliant move.
Yeah. Then take on
b8. Take the rook back, and then I have discovered attack on your queen. So the rook on b8 is attacking the rook of the queen on b3. So you have to move your queen.
Queen a3, for instance.
Yes, and then I take on d5, and once again I have the center. And even though I'm a down exchange against the pawn, the fact that I can move my D and E pawn in the long run
you have to see
actually makes the engine say it's a perfectly equal position.
Yeah, I would even slightly prefer black.
Sometimes there's tricks also with bishop takes b2 in some situations.
Yeah, it's like Jan-Pieter said before, that the white pieces are not coordinating well and the black pieces are. So then being an exchange down for a pawn really means nothing. At least that's what the grandmasters say, and I'm happily quoting them here.
Yeah, that's a little bit hard to see though.
Yeah, queen f5 I think I missed, but it was, I think, also a very difficult move to find.
I didn't see it. I had to do the check, and then I thought, well, yes, obviously, because taking the d5 pawn should be my main focus, and I should be willing to sacrifice an exchange to take the center, because that's ultimately the goal, I would say, of the opening.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And the game bishop c8 was played. How did you both feel about the position after bishop c8?
Yeah, I was quite happy because black had to make so many retreating moves. It feels as though like the queen and bishop are not developed yet. So I think white is certainly better here in pushing back all these pieces and have quite some chances on the queen side also to expand now immediately, and also I had the c6 square. I should have actually played knight d4 in the next move, but I played h3 just to prevent knight g4. But seems like knight d4 immediately is much better.
Yeah, knight g4 is not a threat at all.
Yes.
Because you have knight c6 and bishop g5.
No, yeah. Yes. Yes, I underestimated knight d4, and it's like Kiran says, the black pieces are all backwards, so my development is down, and the only thing that keeps me afloat is, I guess, that the knight, the bishop, the white squared bishop, light squared bishop, and the queen from white are, although they are active, they're not attacking anything on the king side, because the d5 pawns are actually blocking all your advances from the diagonal from the queen to the king, the white queen to the black king, and that means that I'm not in immediate danger, even though white is obviously better in this position. Because if it wasn't for the d pawn, I think white would perhaps be even better, even though I could advance perhaps d5. But it feels like the bishop on c4 is not doing anything right now. The knight on a4 doesn't have any proper square, so it's not doing anything right now, and that compensates somewhat for the fact that my bishop is horrible, that my queen is horrible, and you can allow for h3 even though it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, for h3, we get rook b8, queen d3, and queen a5.
Jan-Pieter, did you consider a knight to e5 here?
For a very brief time, because white would be forced to exchange, because you don't want to retreat. But at the same time, it doesn't feel right, because I'm blocking my dark squared bishop. It's not that obvious to me what I'll gain from it, even though looking at the position now, I'm thinking like, well, bishop f5 is perhaps an option. It also makes me lose a pawn with bishop times a6, right? Or no, I'll take d5 afterwards. So that's not correct.
Yeah, that's
Queen a5? No, probably not.
And perhaps there are some tricks, even though the white's knight becomes active, because the c5 square is now open to the white's knight. And ideally, I don't want to put my d file pawn on the e file, because my goal is still to get to take white's d5 pawn, because it's a weak pawn in the sense that it's not defended by another pawn. It's strong in the sense that it's very active and it's very pushed forward. But ideally, in this opening, you would win the pawn on d5, and then you have your center with the d and e pawn still intact. And so it's for this opening, it's very unnatural to remove the d6 pawn to e5, and then later on it does happen, and it immediately breaks down my structure.
Yeah. I was thinking that maybe knight e8 d6 is improving your position, but it's not enough compared to the other disadvantages that you mentioned.
Yes, it's an interesting idea. So I didn't consider it, because it just felt too unnatural to. I want to keep my d and e pawn intact. I want to say that at move 20 or 30, I'm going to take the center, and that's a dream I want to keep alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I can fully sympathize with that. And queen a5, of course, puts pressure, and that's very logical. So let's move to what happened in the game. Yeah, b3 is also, I think, very logical to cement everything.
Yeah,
yes, but it does change one thing, because white can no longer move the queen to b3 back. So that's why I won something, in the sense that I achieved something.
Yeah, you
however
achieved.
Small.
Yeah, I'm not, with hindsight, not so enthusiastic about queen b3. I think b4 is probably better to take more space, but now that's not possible anymore. So indeed, you made some progress there.
Yeah, from here we thought during the game that white must be clearly better, but it's not. At least that's what I thought. But that's far too easy. It's much more complicated than that, right? After knight
Yes.
yeah.
Well, there was another option instead of knight d4, bishop d4.
Yeah. Preventing this jump, still in a way, because probably you don't want to allow this capture.
But now can probably play bishop b7.
Yeah, that's the drawback, I think, as well. Although, yeah, you can play bishop c3.
Yeah, c3, queen d8, and now the knight on a4 is not looking so happy, right? Maybe, or
Well, yeah, you can
Yes.
now play b4 perhaps and gain some more space. And
yeah, it's
b4, yeah, could be an option. Maybe even knight e4 could be an option if there are some tricks associated with knight c6.
yeah, but just it's slightly different. But I think what happened in the game, of course, was very exciting.
Well, you have to be careful because knight d4 is most oftenly not possible because the d5 pawn is hanging. So also in this position, you basically have to move the bishop back to c3 because otherwise your d5 pawn is undefended or insufficiently defended, and kicking away the queen back to d8 is the only way to do it. And if you play knight d4 with white, then I would probably take knight takes d5, which prevents knight c6, which captures the center, which is the aim. It attacks the bishop on c3. So yes, if white would play
maybe
knight
you're right.
d4,
Maybe you're right. I was just referring to such a position like this, and then if you capture, there could be some idea associated with knight c6. I'm not sure that it works indeed. It depends a little bit on the resulting position, which is very.
Yeah, but in general, I would argue if I at some point manage to capture the d5 pawn, most of my problems are resolved because I have the center I want and I can push it. And even when I'm down something, I get a lot of compensation because it's a hard time for white to fight against those two pawns on d5 and e6.
Yeah, probably
if I can push it up to there. Yes, it's weak now because yes.
Yeah, I think that maybe it's better to play rook to e1, queen d2. But that's
Queen d2 also interesting. Maybe improve the bishop. Maybe you can improve this guy somehow.
Yeah. But let's go to the nice developments in the game.
Knight e5, exciting.
Also, immediately another option was to also play bishop d2, I think, instead of bishop d4. Knight d4 instead of knight d4.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also
true.
Yeah, it's like just different move orders, and there were some subtleties, but bishop d2 I thought gives some time for the queen to go back, but with knight d4 the queen on the a file, there are some more tactics, so that's why I preferred knight d4 first.
Knight d5, queen e2, knight takes. This is very, very complicated, right?
Just a small mention here. The pawn on d5 cannot be taken because after knight d5, bishop d5, queen d5, there is knight b6 at the end. So
that's good to mention.
Yep.
Yeah. So
And I'm actually happy to take the bishop here because you can't take back with the pawn. Whereas my greatest fear would be if white were able to take back the knight with the white pawn, then d5 would become way too strong. I would never be able to combat white's center after this. But it's not possible because queen takes a4. So it's a safe way for me to get the bishop pair without giving up the center, without giving up the potential to capture the center.
Yes, that's true. Had I gone, in this case, yes, could not take with a pawn. But I found this nice intermezzo with knight c6.
Yeah, and then the fun really started for us as spectators.
Very interesting. A very interesting position.
Probably your heartbeat went up for both of you, but we were enjoying ourselves extensively.
Yeah,
let's see.
For instance, maybe
as soon as I got my knight to d4, I always wanted to play knight c6, and since I thought it's playable in this case, and like you show, queen d5 is not possible because of knight e7. So knight c6 is really an interesting move, I think.
Yes, it really poses me for some problems. I don't want to lose the e7 pawn. So I could, of course, if I play my queen back to c7 to cover the e7 pawn, then you would be able to take b3 times c4, and then white would have the center that I can't destroy anymore. So this feels like, even though materially it's equal, position-wise, I'm never going to be able to demolish what you just constructed, and that means to me that I'm going to lose this position eventually. Besides the obvious that knight b6 is threatening, and I'll lose my rook potentially because it doesn't have that many squares anymore.
I think that rook takes c4 is even stronger.
Yes.
Perhaps because you have an immediate tactic with the queen on the discovered checks, but to me it was like, even if he doesn't take with the rook, if he takes with the pawn, I don't see black's opportunity. It's like, now I'm worse in every way. I'm never going to be able to take d5. I'm just fighting a lost battle. And whereas when I take e3, I'm creating some potential, because your knights on the a file are somewhat awkward. It's going to take you some time to get them back into the game. I get some material compensation for the queen because I can take the rook on f1. So I have the bishop pair, I have the rook pair compared to your one rook. And because I have so many light pieces, I should be able to kick your queen around a bit. So that was kind of the idea.
Yeah. And these minors are kind of occupied for a while, right?
But there is a but. In the game it worked, but Kiran should have played knight b6 here.
Yes, I actually spent 14 minutes here, and knight b6 was actually my first thought. I was seriously thinking this move for a long time.
So what held you back, Kiran, from playing the best move in this position?
Well, after rook b8, the move that actually works was knight c6, and that move was something I missed.
Yeah,
because it's very difficult to find, I thought.
Yeah, because the bishop c8 is hanging. That is very strange.
Exactly. So I missed knight c6. I thought knight b6, but after rook b8, my idea was actually to exchange one pair of rooks and this knight for this bishop. It's still winning for white, but there are some key moves also here to find. After rook c8, it's important to first play queen a6, apparently.
Yes, because you're threatening the rook and...
Yeah, but rook c1.
Sorry, my bad. You first play knight c6 and then queen a6. So you first cut off the c file.
Yeah, the knight doesn't go anywhere in this position. That was you're threatening e7, so I have to take knight d5.
Yes, knight d5 and then queen a6.
That's a cute.
Amazing, yeah.
And then you still have your two connected pawns. So I have some compensation in the sense that I get the center. I can play e6 and d5 in the long run, but it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough.
Yeah, and also another reason I was hesitating was because after knight b6, if I play knight b6 there instead of rook f1.
Okay, which move are we talking here?
Yeah.
2 or 3 moves back.
Yeah.
Here?
Even one further. After, instead of rook b8, maybe something like knight g3 first, because the problem here is not knight
g3,
but knight g3. Yes. So here after fg3, black can then you play rook b8 and all that, but black here can eventually play knight h5 and put his bishop on e5 and create some mating net around my king. So this was also another reason why I was hesitating to play this. Not immediately. You play rook b8 and after all the this one I was also a bit hesitant to allow this, because now there are some serious back rank issues.
And also, when you sacrifice your f-pawn, I'll probably gain your d5 pawn at some point. And when you lose your f-pawn, I can push f5, e5, e4, and d5, d4, d3. And once I have all those pawns on f5, e4, and d3, so all the white squares, queen against rook and bishop is not enough to stop that, because it's a dark squared bishop.
Yeah.
And in combination with all those pawns, potentially I could get on these white squares. You're going to have a very hard fight to defend from it, against it, and to stop them from promoting.
Yeah, you can
So I
block
do
on
think
the dark square.
that preventing knight g3 is structurally sound, even though tactically you could have done better, because knight b6 and knight c6 is immediately winning.
Yes, but firstly, I did not see knight c6, and then I was also a bit afraid of knight g3, so I eventually just took the knight on f1, because I was also running quite low on time at that point.
I did expect queen take, or king take, sorry, or queen take, but not rook take.
King takes felt a bit unnatural, because in case there are some back rank issues later, then the king would not have any place to go. With king on g1, going to h2 felt better.
Fair enough.
And not with the queen, because I wanted to also hit e7, not leave the e5.
Yeah, now we get a very unusual or uncommon material imbalance here.
Yes.
As I said, then the fun started for us.
Indeed.
I was actually quite okay with this position, because I have the bishop pair, I have the central pawns, my minor pieces are in the center, whereas white's minor pieces are on the a file. And I was actually too happy, and I didn't calculate my next move very well, because after rook d1 I made a huge blunder.
Rook c1.
Or c1 first, sorry. Yes. And then I...
Yeah, so this felt also natural to me. I think you want to exchange at least the pair of rooks, so that you don't have these redundant rooks in a way. And I don't recall exactly what Alessandro and I were thinking during the game about the evaluation of this position, but black has only one weakness basically, potentially. That's the a6 pawn. But the pieces really coordinate well in the center, right? The minors.
Yes.
And we need the white knights on the a file. Yeah, takes some time to develop again, to do something useful.
And in fact, the knight on a4 doesn't have any square at the moment.
Indeed, yeah. So after rook c8, indeed also the c3 square is covered, and b2 is obviously also guarded. So yeah. But then rook d1. White does not want to exchange a pair of rooks.
Yes. Like you said, if I exchange this one pair of rooks, I think it's very difficult to play. Perhaps it's still equal or slightly better, but when I'm low on time, I think it's a very difficult position to play.
Yeah, practically it's very, very challenging. Yeah.
And I think we now come to a critical position.
Yeah.
This was an intended cheap trick, so bishop e5. So the idea was that after bishop e5, I hope that white is taking the knight on d5. And after bishop takes, queen takes, there's rook c1 with a mate threat.
With a mate to follow, yeah.
Queen d1.
So that's kind of what I was hoping for, but after the correct response, knight c4, the mate threat is gone, because you block the c square of c file. You still threaten to take the two minor pieces with your rook, which is a good exchange for white.
And you threaten this damaged structure also, and the bishop pair is then gone after knight d5.
My bishop pair is gone after this, my perfect center is gone after this, so yes, this was really a crucial mistake in the remainder of the game, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's see what you should have played.
My inclination, I haven't looked at the game before again, but I think something like this looks natural. And then, to basically also develop the f8 rook. But you have to somehow.
Yeah, but now you can take on d5.
Yeah.
There's no trick.
There's no trick.
So that's true.
Still
Yes,
dangerous.
I believe the correct move was knight c3 rather than rook c2.
Yeah, so I was thinking about knight c3. It looks unnatural because you're exchanging knight on e4 that doesn't do anything, but you gain time and you can double rooks.
Yeah.
So even after queen b7, you can play rook fc8. That's
Yeah, the e7 pawn is hanging, so perhaps I would have to play bishop f6 first, because I don't want to lose those central pawns. I fought so hard to get them. And I would basically be sacrificing my a6 pawn in exchange for a bishop pair and a center that's going to advance at some point in the game.
Yeah, well, the ancients don't agree with you.
Probably.
But that's, of course, cheating in some sense.
And then now bishop e5, or because this to me feels like you're still putting pressure on the back rank from white. You're threatening rook c8, it seems. Rook c1, sorry, rook c1.
Yeah, so that's.
And then white's knight is not doing anything, whereas all four black pieces are eyeing on the king side from white. So white's pieces are not coordinating here, and black's pieces are. So I guess that's why the engines are like, it's okay to sacrifice the e7 pawn because there's so much activity going on. Even though, yes, I'm still too hesitant to go for that attack, and I would rather keep my structure intact. Go a bit too defensive, I guess.
And another option is knight b4 here.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking.
That is maybe an easier move to find than.
That's a more human move.
Yeah, knight c3, I think, because indeed what you say is completely right. It feels very strange to me to exchange off this piece. Knight b4, and then maybe you want to get the knight, pivot the knight to d4, or what's the idea?
Well, first, of course, you attack, then you play knight c2. So you're attacking a3, but also the idea of knight d4, and then attacking b3. So you're putting pressure on the white pawns. I'm not saying that you need to take them, but...
Well, if I could take them, then I think black is winning. If I would win both those pawns, then I would have a free A pawn, a free D pawn, which is defended, and then the queen is not enough. Yeah,
so white cannot allow just that pawns are taken. You should do something about it.
I would rather play rook d2, I think, instead of playing a3, just like I played a few moves later.
But here you would still face some back rank issues after perhaps not bishop rook c1 first.
Rook c1 first.
Now, if you go back, then you have one time, right? So.
And now I would argue bishop e5 just to ruin your kingside pawns, and potentially I'm threatening bishop d5 once your rook is removed.
Yeah,
and then there is a lot of threats on your. So yes. So I'd be very comfortable in this position because your knights are still not cooperating and still not taking part in the game.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit careful with.
Still very, very weak, right? If you can double somehow on the back rank, on first rank, it's also going to be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, you have to look out for queen b7 here with black. So maybe you should first play rook b8 to take away the option of queen b7, because also your knight on b4 will be hanging then. But indeed, it's much harder for white here. And I think black is really better here.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. So let's see if we get.
This is a very good move, knight c4.
Yeah.
And of course we get this situation where black loses the bishop pair and has this pawn, which is maybe not very weak, but at least there's some structural damage here. But more importantly, perhaps the bishop pair. And of course this knight that was doing nothing is now off the board. And this exchange off versus this very powerful bishop. So white can be a lot happier than a couple of moves ago.
Yes.
Still, white has the task to develop his friend on a4. first guarding the pawn on a2?
Yes, because committing a3 just weakens both the pawns and didn't want to damage the structure. And now perhaps there is no back rank issue.
With the bishop gone, right? There it's after rook c1 you can play queen h2, and on the dark squares you're quite safe.
So also here I'm keeping out queen b7, which was mentioned earlier in another position, because it's still the same problem. If I allow for queen b7, there are so many targets, and then I'm going to lose something. So rook b8 is not ideal because the rook isn't really attacking anything or threatening anything, but it's a purely defensive move to keep out queen b7.
Yeah, and now we see queen e3 also, potentially going to a7, attacking here the e5 pawn. It's getting a bit difficult, right?
Perhaps a discovered attack with the rook on c1 hanging, so perhaps rook d8 is a potential threat.
Exchange one pair of rooks.
Yeah, Jochem, you made a very interesting quote from Bas van der Plas at this moment, that in these kinds of positions it's easier to play with white, I think, because you have less pieces to think about, especially when you exchange more pieces. Then basically you're playing with your queen, and black has to think which piece to move.
I think also here black has some trouble coordinating. I mean, this bishop is nice, but it will be undefended also after f6. This is undefended, this is undefended, and this is also a bit iffy, this knight on b4, I would say. That could also be attacked relatively easily. So it's very difficult to play for black here, I think. Easy to make a mistake.
Yes, I'm not happy with my position here. And knight c5 activates white's last weak piece, so white's position is much better here compared to black's.
Knight d3. Let's go a little bit quicker because...
Yes, I was not very happy with knight d3, to be honest, because, well, I completely missed rook c3. I thought I'll be comfortably exchanging this knight, but rook c3 just... I was just caught off guard here because I was slow on time and I didn't see this coming. And this was just a little bit unpleasant for me to see this move on the board.
Yeah.
But then there was queen a7, rook d8. Here I actually thought that I'm losing this knight, whereas I completely missed queen b4 after queen e7, which I think
I did see it. I didn't know, but I still would be willing to exchange it because I would have the rook and bishop against you. So rook takes d3, and it doesn't really matter which rook, because at some point here white can take the rook on d3 first, and you have to take with the rook, otherwise your rook is lost, and now you can take the knight. And in the position that we got on the board, which I played deliberately because it looks more threatening and it seems like white is losing a piece. So if we can go back in the position 3 moves, then I took with this rook, with the d8 rook, and now white can just take on b4, which is very interesting.
Yes, this was a very unusual geometry. And that's also what made me just here.
Yes.
Yeah. Queen c3. I thought that I lost the knight here because it was a bit counterintuitive, this move. Queen b4
Yes.
and being able to take on c3.
Because basically every piece is undefended at some point it's defended because of counter threats.
Yeah. Very, very strange position, indeed. Yeah.
But okay, I still felt this should be close to a draw because I thought I can have some perpetuals here, and not surprisingly, I think it's 0-0 here.
Yes, you have so many checks that I can't defend against it, and you're threatening so many pawns that I can't defend them all.
Yeah. Funny.
I think it's interesting. Perhaps in this position, if black had a dark squared bishop instead of a light squared, I think he was probably close to winning here.
Yes, potentially, yes.
Yeah, it depends maybe on where. I mean,
So here I played knight b4, right?
a5.
Oh, a5 first, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it keeps everything covered for now.
Yeah, pawn was also attacked. Yeah, F.
Yes, that was a very good move.
Yeah.
Because my e5 pawn is my last defender of the king that prevents your queen from taking all the dark square checks.
Yes. Yeah, I think practically this was probably a good move, but apparently here queen b6 instead of f4 is also winning. The idea is the threat is queen d8 check. So yeah, after if black plays something like e4, threat is queen d8 and to take the rook on c3. So there are some devious plans for white here, and
Yes.
he also defends f2 and attacks a5. So yeah, it was a hard move to find.
Yeah, that is. You were really low on time, Kiran.
Yes. So I saw f4 and just clarifying the position a little bit in the center.
Yeah.
And just made it a bit more easier for me to play.
Yeah. Knight d5.
And here I was to some degree okay with the position in the sense that I thought I should have a draw here because I have a very powerful knight in the center, because after knight d5 all my pieces are more or less defended. Well, the a5 pawn not, but otherwise the bishop defends the knight defends the rook, and my king defends the bishop. So I was still thinking it's probably a draw. I don't want to draw, so that's why I was starting to move my king towards the center in hope of gobbling up some pawns with my king. But ultimately, I should have just accepted the draw and played, because you played queen b8, right? Yes.
Yeah.
And I should have just played queen g7 and then accepted the draw, because it's...
It was this position that was 0-0, not the one before. Correction there. Yeah, but this was clearly a draw, I think.
But I didn't want to draw. I thought I have more pieces now, so if I can at some point just... I wanted to place my bishop on d5 at some point, and then the rook on the second rank, and then I thought if I can manage that, then you can't defend g2 anymore, because I have a knight, so you can't exchange your queen for my rook and bishop. And that means that I should be able to win that pawn at some point, and then your king is weak, and then my pieces are more powerful, but it's hard to accomplish, and it was much harder than I thought it would be to get it.
Yeah.
So I played knight c7, right?
Knight c7, yeah. And
yes, because it opens up
this idea then in mind.
Yes, because I'm like, you're going to take on a5, that's fine, because I'm going to move rook to c2 anyway. I want to move my bishop to d5, and it feels like you're helping me achieve that plan. And you, of course, you have a connected free pawns on the a and b file, but you have to do something about g2. So white is also defending here, and that gave me some perspective to perhaps win or get some attacking chances, because I that's what I liked about the position. But after your next check, after queen g5, I believe it was, or b4 first, I played the one move that I shouldn't have played.
Yes.
And basically every other square that was viable would have been okay to some degree, because it's not as harmful as the one that I played.
Yeah.
I think here only king d8 survives, because every other king move loses.
This one is not so smart. Also not so bit unnatural.
King f6, you play queen d4 first, I believe.
And then you pick up.
Yeah, you pick up the rook wherever you go.
Oh, right? So that's not safe either. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
For instance, here, check.
Yes. So if you go king g5, then there is queen d8, and then you can also pick the bishop later. So now if you go king h6, there is queen f8 check.
Funny, yeah.
Yes. So yeah.
Yes.
it was very surprising that there was only one king move that was saving.
I thought there were more. So interesting. Yes.
King d8.
Yes, this was the only move that was saving.
And after the check, you have to
Bishop e8, yeah.
have to play this, and then you can maybe dream again of bishop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then white at least has to consider that, and they still have a lot of checks with your queen, so it's probably still possible to get a draw or to get perhaps some counterplay, but at least black is attacking as well. I can't just defend those pawns because ultimately the queen is going to eat the pawns on h7 and g6 as well. I have to get some counterplay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I made a mistake with king d7, and you played queen g4, which was perfect, and there's no way to prevent any piece loss, so I'm going to lose something at some point.
Yeah. Immediate threat is, in a way, of course, queen d1. If you go back, if you stay on the d file, and if you go back here, you have a check on e4, right?
Yeah. So any square in the e file is queen e4. Any square in the d file is queen d1, and queen c6 is also queen e4.
Yeah.
So I was surprised, and then I thought, well, at least let's lose a piece rather than a rook.
It's really an amazing geometry here. Like
yeah.
Queen e4, queen takes.
And yes, but now I still had some desperate hopes of being able to get my bishop to d5, but it's like, well, it felt lost because, yeah, you had so many checks, you played it out so well.
Even without the knight, of course, this you can maybe just guard it with the queen. This situation also, right? I mean, it's because of the pawns.
Yes. Now that the knight is gone, it's not as threatening anymore.
Queen h4, queen d4.
So can we go back one move? So basically, you played queen h4, and I'm considering what was wrong with bishop d5. Oh, you could play queen d8. Sorry, yes. So I still can't activate my pieces in the manner that I want. So I'm so unhappy with my position.
One move go. So here, maybe you can do it, but still.
Yeah, it feels very, very iffy to leave it at the center because ultimately, there will be some check which will probably force you.
Yes, so queen b4, I don't know if there's enough there to attack it and to gain it, but no, it's probably that's.
Yeah, you have to go here.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's like white has so much activity here. The queen is roaming freely across the board, and black is just desperately trying to hold his pieces together and losing a pawn after another.
Yeah, 3 pawns already behind h4. And of course, there is a minor increment of 5 seconds, so white will not lose on time here. Queen d8 nicely finishes the game. Queen a5.
Check.
And there's no way to defend it.
Even if you did, it's worth probably trying to take the pawn. Yeah.
And I don't have bishop d5 here, which I want to play. I don't have rook to the second rank anymore. So, I lost all hope in this position. I have absolutely no counterplay against white's advances from his pawns and the additional activity from white and additional material, obviously. So it was absolutely lost here. And when I gave away the bishop. So that's why I took the pawn on a2. It was like, well, at least I get something back. And then he played knight to queen d8. And I thought, yes, well, nice. Congratulations.
Enough for that evening, and let's look forward to another game.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah, interesting game. Also very, very interesting to hear Jan-Pieter and Kiran, both your analysis on this game and your thoughts during the game. Much appreciated. Also, I'd like to thank Alessandro and for his valuable commentary and his preparation, and also welcomed your insights. And thank you for watching. See you in the next one.
Yeah, thank you.